Your AI agent will always think it's up to date, and often it's not. I built an n8n workflow that fixes that. Because most RAG data pipelines only upload documents to Supabase, they never keep them in sync, while files change, people delete docs, and your agent slowly drifts from reality. I will be talking to Penelope, a Slack app I've set up in one of the previous videos. We'll talk about very serious corp HR policies and see how the responses change based on the edits made to files in the Google Drive folder. I have a first question to Penelope. I'm going to ask Penelope, is there any budget for learning and development? Because maybe if there is a budget, I'd like to spend it and get some new skills. And Penelope says, I couldn't find any specific information in the HR policy documents. This is because at the moment there's nothing in our documents table in Supabase. It's completely empty, and Penelope is instructed to only answer questions based on internal documentation. That's why she's not going to respond to this question unless we add some information in here. So let's open this n8n workflow. This is the main character of this video, and click Execute Workflow. This is going to execute the initial sync. As you can see, the workflow was executed successfully, so let's see what happened. In Supabase, I can see some new rows with chunks of the policies that were taken from the Google Drive. Here's the Google Drive folder. There are 3 policies in here, so annual leave and time off, flexible working and remote work, and also learning and development policy. So right now, Penelope should be capable of answering our question. Heading back to Slack, and I'm just gonna ask, can you check again? Please, be kind to your LLM. Be kind, always. Not only to LLM, be kind. And Penelope now knows that the Very Serious Corp provides an annual learning and development budget, and that each full-time employee has a learning budget of $1,000 per year. That's great news for each full-time employee of Very Serious Corp, but also for us, because it means that our workflow has worked as it was supposed to work. So let's see what happened behind the scenes. You can divide this workflow in 3 sections. The first section is where we basically define our triggers and we also set parameters. The second is this one in here. Here's our logic, and here's where we determine what to create, what to ignore, what to update, what to delete. And here we have a loop, and this loop is basically a way to individually process each file that needs to be processed. Zooming in to the first part, we're having our set node, and in this set node, we're having a few, let me switch to schema view, parameters. So the first one is the folder ID of the Google Drive folder we're syncing with. Then we have source ID, that's Google Drive. I'm using source ID in here because I can modify this workflow, make it work with Notion, make it work with Confluence, make it work with whatever I want, but I would like to keep track of sources these documents come from. So then it's easier to keep syncing multiple sources with the same destination table because we will be able to filter based on the source UID. And then we have some config, so it's chunk size, chunk overlap, and we also have 2 custom function names because this workflow uses custom functions in Supabase. Why is this node even here? It's because each of the workflows, each of the templates I build always starts with the set node where I define all the parameters that are used later on within the workflow. So anytime I need to update or change something, I do it here and I don't have to do it in all the nodes in the workflow. If I define these parameters in the beginning, I can just reference them. But it's not the focus of this video, so let's move forward. Then we're listing files from our folder. So we're getting 3 files. As you've seen in my Google Drive folder, this is correct. And then I'm also listing all the IDs of the files that are already stored in Supabase. So in this case, there's no output data because before this thing, there was nothing in Supabase. Here we have our compare datasets node. And there's a separate video I made on using this node, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but using this node allows us to determine what action do we need to take for each file, whether we need to create it in Supabase, whether we need to ignore it because it's already in Supabase and haven't been updated since the last sync, whether we need to update it because it is in Supabase, but it was updated since the last time we've synced it, or maybe we need to delete it because it is in Supabase, but now it's not anymore in our Google Drive folder. Then we just merge all these paths, we filter out anything that has action set to ignore, and only proceed with individual executions for anything that has action different than ignore. This time, no surprise, there wasn't anything in Supabase, so we need to create these 3 files in Supabase. So I have this if node in here that checks for value of key action. It's create. Therefore, we're going to this path. So first, we start with getting a document from Google Docs. And I'm using the HTTP node in here because it allows me to set export format to Markdown. Markdown is always my preference whenever I'm loading documents into the vector database for further retrieval. And I'm just passing the file ID of the file that I want to get. Then just setting the text to chunk. We very rarely upload just the whole document. We rather chunk it. And also this is a topic for a separate video, but think of it as taking the document, dividing it into parts while making sure there's a little bit of overlap between them. And I do it using this custom code node in here, so it outputs chunks for each document. Then in my database, I don't want to store just the chunks. I want to store them with title appended to them. So I basically use this set node to set an enhanced chunk. Then I pass it to the embeddings model. And this whole process is worth a separate explanation. But think of embeddings as meaning expressed with a lot of numbers. I'll make sure to cover this in a separate video. Then before we upload it to Supabase, we just set the body of the request. So we set content, that's our chunk with appended title. Embedding, we've got the result of the previous API call. And then we put some metadata in there. And the most important metadata is external ID, updated at, because these two allow us to determine whether something is new, whether something got updated. So without these, all the sync logic basically cannot function. Then we also have source UID that I've mentioned is important if we want to sync data from multiple sources to the same destination table. And if it comes to created at and name, this is just something I store, but it's not absolutely essential to make this use case work. And then we make some post calls to Supabase, to the documents table, where we just map output of the previous node as the body for the request. There's one more node in here. We're checking whether the action was create or whether the action was update. In this case, the action was to create, so we basically don't do anything else. We just end the loop, and that's how our files, our chunks, land in the table in Supabase. Now let's go for a few realistic business scenarios, starting with someone adding a new policy. You already know we have 3 policies in this folder, but actually let me add the 4th one. You can see the new one is the expense reimbursement policy. And right now, we're going to go to our workflow and execute it once again. Let's see if everything will work as expected. You can see the workflow executed successfully. If we zoom in here, we can see that we had 3 items to ignore, 1 item to create, and then we've processed exactly 1 item in the loop, and the path this item has followed was the create part that I explained earlier. If we go to the Supabase table and refresh, we can see additional chunks for the expense reimbursement policy. So let's go back to Slack. And actually, let's take advantage of the AI apps and agents mode that was used to set up this app. And let's start a separate parallel chat thread. And in this one, I'm just going to ask, how much can I spend on meals during a business trip? Penelope is thinking intensively, and we have an answer. It's either $40 per day on meals for domestic travel, $60 per day on meals for international travel. Where does this information come from? You probably will not be surprised if I will tell you it's coming from the expense reimbursement policy, and actually this line in here. So the first case, someone adding a new policy, is covered. What if someone updates one of our existing policies? We previously asked Penelope about the budget for learning and development. It was $1,000, but let's change it. Let's say we double it. So we make it $2,000. And right now, let's go back to our main character workflow and execute it. One file is being processed. The execution was completed. And again, if we zoom in, we can see that we had 3 items to ignore and 1 item to update. So what happened now? We're entering the loop where the first condition is false because the action is not create. And then we check whether the action is update or delete. And here's the important thing, because we will not be updating, we will not be making any put or patch calls to Supabase right now. Instead, first, we will be uploading new chunks, so the updated policy in chunks. And then once this operation is successful, we will be deleting all the old ones, all the outdated ones. So at first, the execution follows the create part. As you can see, all the steps were completed, but then it proceeds with the update path, and we execute the Supabase function where we pass parameters, and this is external ID. External ID is basically ID of the file from the Google Drive we're uploading. It's a unique identifier. Then we have source UID, and then we also pass the timestamp, updated at before, and we also pass a flag, Boolean value is inclusive. And this may be overwhelming, so let's slow down for a moment. In Supabase, I've created this function. And this function expects arguments. External ID, source UID, updated at before, and is inclusive. Then we use this function to get IDs of all the document chunks where external ID is same as metadata external ID, source ID same as metadata source ID, and now we need to tell Supabase that we want to delete these chunks if the updated at timestamp was before the timestamp we pass as an argument. Going back quickly to n8n, we pass the timestamp of the document we're currently processing in the loop. And all the chunks that we've uploaded right now will have exactly this timestamp. So this is our way of telling Supabase we need everything that has the same external ID and the same source UID deleted if the timestamp is before updated at timestamp of the current file. And additionally, we also have this parameter saying is inclusive, and it can either be true or false. And since we want to delete only the things where the updated at was earlier than the updated at before we're passing as an argument, and we want to use operator less instead of less or equal to, the is inclusive has to be false, and we make it false because we have a simple expression in here that basically says, if value of action is delete, then make it true, otherwise make it false, and the value is update, so the outcome of this is false. If you feel like you need to repeat this part of the video, that's absolutely fine. But also no, you can just get this template and you can get all the code snippets and functions if you join my community. So links in the description. But also, if this is confusing for you right now, this is a great learning opportunity. So cheers to all the new skills. And in the meantime, let's move forward. I'm opening my Supabase table and I can see that I still have chunks for 4 policies. So I have no duplicates whatsoever. So we were able to create chunks for the updated document, but also delete all the outdated chunks. And there's only one way to verify that. I mean, there are more, but we're going to check it with Penelope. So let's go to history of our chats. Let's go back to our initial thread about the budget for learning and development and say, can you check if anything changed? Send this message and let's see what Penelope has to say. And actually, the current learning and development policy at a very serious corp says that every full-time employee has an annual learning budget of $2,000. So exactly the value from our updated policy. Therefore, the second case, someone updating a policy, someone updating a document, is sorted. The workflow works as expected. We've got one more scenario to check, and this is the scenario where someone just deletes the policy. So we're going to remove one of the policies from this folder, and it's going to be the flexible working and remote work policy. Sorry. The policy is deleted. So now let's go back to our main character n8n workflow, and we're going to execute it one last time in this video. As you can see, this time the execution was almost instant. And if we zoom in, we can see we've ignored 3 files and we've proceeded with deletion for one of the files. In this loop, for this condition in here, the action is delete. Therefore, it follows this path highlighted in green. And we get to the node when we call Supabase custom function. And there's just a tiny little difference in here in comparison to what we did when we were updating stuff. Because if we scroll down, the value for isInclusive key is true. And this time it's true because the value of action is delete. The only difference is that Supabase will now delete only the chunks that have updated at timestamp that are less or equal to the value we've passed, while for the action update, it's only less than. So it's just a different operator. And we can see 3 chunks got deleted in here, and it was the flexible working and remote work policy. If we go to Supabase, we can confirm that we don't see anything if it comes to this policy anymore. So it's time to go to our assistant, to Penelope for the last time. We haven't spoken to Penelope about flexible work, so let's start a new chat. I'm going to ask her, can I go for a trip to France for a week and work from there? Penelope's thinking, and she says that she couldn't find specific information on remote work from abroad in the HR policy documents. We've deleted this document from the Google Drive folder, and then we've executed the sync. Therefore, all the related chunks were removed from the vector database. We've made it till the end, and you hopefully have learned something new. And even if it still is a bit confusing, I can reassure you, if you're going to watch this video one more time, or even 2 more times if you need to, you'll understand what we just went through and how you can use this knowledge in anything you're going to build from now on. And this will surely make you a better builder. If anything wasn't clear, please leave a comment. And if everything was clear, you can leave a comment and subscribe to this channel. The fastest way to get the template, to get all the functions, and an always updated version of what was just built is to join my community. And you can find a link to this in the description. I treat it like a living lab, so people bring real business cases and we workshop them, share templates, short courses, and step-by-step build guides. So join, drop your problem, and I'll help you turn it into a reliable production-ready flow. See you inside. Take care.